can you make it loud for Mr. Jonah Sachs, ladies and gentlemen, please?
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm glad to kick off this day. And I'm here with a message that is happening across the world right now on stages where people like me are telling people like you that if you want to succeed in business today, you've got to tell stories, as if that is something entirely new, as if that's not something that's been discovered over the last century. And as I've looked back on where storytelling has happened, I find it pretty much everywhere in successful businesses and successful campaigns. And one of my favorite stories is also one of the saddest stories, but it so perfectly typifies the kind of storytelling that moves people. And here it is from the 1920s. It's the story, there it is. It's the story of sad Edna. Oops, here we go. Okay, so it's the story of sad Edna. This woman is a spinster. She's 27 years old and still not married. Why? Well, she has a problem that no one had ever heard of before when this advertisement came out. It was called halitosis. And the makers of Listerine who marketed this product, even they had never heard of halitosis. But when this ad came out, which tells you that if you have this problem, you cannot even know it, and no one will even tell you. There is no way to know except to use this product and avoid it. Millions of people rushed out to avoid the horrible fate of sad Edna. Now, they're not talking about the facts and the features of this arcane product that no one knew about and no one wanted. They're telling a story. And before we talk about how that story really worked, let's talk about what a story is. A story is a series of characters and conflicts and plots and settings that play out on the surface of the story. So if you go to a movie and you say, well, in the first scene, Dorothy left Kansas, and in the second scene, she met the Good Witch of the West. You're talking about the surface of the story, but every character is placed there. Every piece of information is placed on the surface of the story to illustrate a core truth about how the world works. And that's the moral of the story. A well-told story will give you a core truth that you can say, yes, that's my truth too. My truth is that I might have bad breath, for instance. Now, that story is based on values, right? The moral is always going to be based on values. So if I tell you a story and the moral is better safe than sorry, you know that I value safety and security, and I want you to value that too. And if you like the story, you're going to start holding those values yourself. I could tell you a different story. He who hesitates is lost. Now you know that I value risk and adventure, and you should value that too. Human beings share their values and their views of the world by telling great stories. And the best brands and the best businesses align every single one of their communications in this crazy world of multiple touch points and thousands of people telling their story to them and back with them around core truths and around core values. Now, you're probably wondering, what kind of core values is that sad Edna really getting across? Are these the kind of values that we want to share with our customers today? Well, that sad Edna story is not actually a story that I admire or want you guys to start telling yourselves. It's part of inadequacy marketing. It's part of this old broadcast way of telling stories, which tells you that you suck, and that the only way to have a good and better life is to find a hero. And oh, by the way, that hero is this product that you can buy. So like any good story, or like many good stories, there's a damsel in distress, which is you guys. There's a villain, which is a scary and horrible world out there that could consume you at any moment. And there is a hero, which is the product or the service that we're offering, right? Now, that kind of works when you're sitting there reading Ladies' Home Journal, and you open this ad that's threatening you and telling you how bad you are. And who do you turn to say, what's going on? Well, you don't. And the person who placed the ad has more money and more authority than you, so you start to believe it. But we don't sit there and consume media in the same way. We now decide what we take on. We skip over those ads. We pass along what we think is compelling and interesting. We know that we are now in control as audiences of the information we take in. So what's going to survive in that kind of landscape? Well, that's where I look to Joseph Campbell, because he studied what kind of stories really spread when people are in control across time and culture. And he came up with this pattern he called the hero's journey, which if you're a storyteller or interested in storytelling, you've probably heard of. In fact, when George Lucas was having trouble writing this weird space opera in the 70s, he called Joseph Campbell and said, help me with my movie. And together they wrote Star Wars. So how does this story work? Well, you've got this helpless outsider. So this could be like a hobbit or a slave or a This is Moses when he's 80 years old in the story of the Bible, someone who really has no way to change the world. And then one day they meet a mentor. So this is like Obi-Wan Kenobi or the fairy godmother. It's God in the story of Moses. And this person says, so much more is possible. You are a hero. And the hero says, oh no, not me. I'm 3 feet tall. I sweep the ashes in the fireplace. I stutter. But the mentor says, no, you've got to take a dangerous journey and you can fix this world. And yeah, you're probably going to get killed. It's probably impossible. But go and try it. And the hero says, no. But then the mentor gives them some kind of magic gift, like the force or ruby red slippers, magic wand, and says, you can do it. So the hero says, okay, let's go. We're going to do this. And the mentor says, no, you got to do this by yourself. So the hero goes and fights this dragon and in an unlikely way steals this treasure. But this treasure doesn't make the hero rich or famous or more popular with their peers. It doesn't cure her bad breath. It helps her come back and heal the world, make a better world. That's the story that Campbell said when we choose what stories we want to consume, that we pass this story along. And that's why Hollywood uses this all the time. This is why novelists use this pattern all the time. And this is why when our audiences get to decide whether they listen to our messages, we can speak to them this way. It's such the opposite. Imagine sharing with your social network and your friends, hey guys, you probably have bad breath and you don't know it. Is that going to build social capital? Of course not. But imagine passing along a message that says, look how great you guys are. Look how great you can be. That's the kind of stuff that spreads. Those are the kind of stories that can really make a difference and really work in our modern landscape. So if we think of our businesses and our work as a story, how do we align it to the kind of story that people want to hear and share? How do we share the kind of values people care about today? So I'm going to show you just 3 quick transformations to make you a hero in your own storytelling so that you can move beyond those kind of tired ways of communicating, whether it's either around the facts and the features of your business, the authority that you have because you've been in the space for so long, or that very tired but very easy way to communicate, which is to basically threaten and scare our audiences and then hope that they're going to be so frightened they're going to come to us and give us money. So the first is thinking about the hero, right? So the hero in the story is never the knight in shining armor. It's never the person who knows how to solve the quest. It's always the outsider, the most unlikely person. And Campbell said that we would listen to these stories and share them because by hearing them, we could believe if an ordinary person could change the world, then we could be a hero in our own lives too. So the hero, when you communicate, is not you, right? So when you're telling your story, you're not the hero. The hero is the audience. So this is kind of typical. Yes. I think I just nailed that point. This whole conference is falling apart. Okay, so anyway, so the hero is in the broadcast era, and this is sort of broadcast marketing brought just to Facebook, and does not have very many shares, is look how great we are. You are the consumer. So many clients that we deal with come in and say, oh, we want to target these consumers. They're not consumers, they're human beings, right? And it's not about how great we are to get them to consume this thing. It's about how much can we inspire them to partner with us, right? So in really good future marketing and storytelling marketing, we're going to engage people. We're going to give them something that says, look how great you are, something that they want to share, where they're the hero. So we're starting to see marketing campaigns and causes that really don't say, hey, give us money and we'll change the world, but they'll say, hey, make your identity be part of this. You're the hero of the story. Spread this with us, and we will help you along your way. So next time you sit down to craft a communication in a story-based way, tell a story that makes somebody else the hero of the story, someone that your audiences can really identify with. Stop talking about how great you are. Talk about how great they can be. So that's the first lesson. The second, so if you're not the hero, who do you get to be? Well, this is the great opportunity to be Obi-Wan Kenobi. You can be the mentor to these heroes in the story, right? So in the old days, the mentor or the marketer would speak in this voice of God, right? Like, there's never been a better time to buy a Cadillac. Hurry in today, supplies are limited, right? And you would sit there and you would never be like, who is that guy who's telling me that, right? That's just the guy who has money so he can be on your radio, and you're never going to be on the radio, so you go buy the Cadillac, right? So what I think is interesting is that even in the story of Moses, where God is the mentor, even he's not allowed to speak in the voice of God to get Moses to move to action. Because God comes to Moses in the form of the burning bush, and he says, go free the slaves. And Moses says, who are you? What's your name? And God says, I am that I am, which is like a weird response. But Moses then says, that's not good enough. Come out of the bush and sit with me on the mountain for 5 days. And they make this very personal relationship. And the whole idea of the hero's journey is it's about a personal connection between the mentor and the hero. And that's why, if we want to engage people, we need to access that human voice. That's why the speakers today who are going to talk to you about communicating with humor, accessing a unique voice, being Yoda, that's how we connect with people these days. That's how we get them to share our content. Instead of shouting at them what to do, we make change appealing and we access a humanity. At Free Range, we use these archetypes to say, if your business or brand was a person, what kind of person would you be? Who's your role model? I use the what would Jesus do metaphor, where kids were walking around, 30 million kids were walking around with bracelets that said, what would Jesus do? So instead of reading the Bible, they were thinking, well, if I was Jesus, what would I do in this situation? You should take the same with your brand, even though your brand is probably not Jesus. But you should take that same approach. What if we are a human being, what kind of human being would we be so we can access that very human voice? So always find that inner Yoda to stand out from the crowd and to tell your stories. The last transformation comes from a little bit of evolutionary biology, which I'll share with you in 3.5 minutes. When I was a kid, I had one channel. And this was the only thing that was apparently appropriate for me. This is the only thing I was really allowed to watch. And this tells you basically what the standard was for storytelling back in the day, right? Like I had one choice, and it was horrible. It was terrible. But this passed for a story, so I would watch it, right? Three's Company, if you're not old enough to recognize this. Now, today, our audiences have billions of choices of what they can consume as content, right? And what they can take in. And their brains are constantly scanning the horizon, thumbnails and opportunities. So what is their brain looking for when they don't have just one channel? Well, to understand that, we can look back at human evolution and human history. And one thing that we know is that 70,000 years ago, when our first ancestors first sort of started spreading out around the world, they had brains that were physiologically identical to the brains that we have today. And they were programmed to scan the horizon for interesting things. It was a life or death matter. So what were they looking for? Well, they're looking for what I call freaks and cheats. And I learned this through a movie I made about 10 years ago called The Meatrix, where we were trying to communicate about factory farming. In fact, we wanted people to know that factory farming was a horrible way of raising animals and making food. And instead of showing bloodied chickens and ugly slaughterhouses, we showed this funny movie, and it taught me about how the brain looks for content. So the first thing is that when we were on the savannah 70,000 years ago, our brain was programmed to look around for other human faces. We live in tribes of about 80 people, and as social animals, we're programmed to really read what's on the face of another human being. But we're not just looking for any human being. If we see a human being who's different than the kind of person we've ever seen before, that's an enormous threat or enormous opportunity. Usually we just knew the same 80 people, but then you meet a stranger, wow, that's a big deal. It's kind of a miracle that we walk down the street every day and meet hundreds of strangers and nobody tries to kill each other and, take over each other's land. That's a big deal, right? So human brains are programmed to look for what I call freaks. That means characters and people who really break our expectations. There's all kinds of brain science that shows that our brains light up when we look at people who are different than what we've seen before. That's why stories are filled with animal gods and crazy characters, and we remember those characters. So instead of us just talking about bad factory farms, we told a story, and we put a cow in a manure-smeared trench coat called the Muffius. Obviously, this is a spoof. We didn't make it all up from scratch. But we gave a thumbnail that people could say, what the hell is that? And want to click on it, right? So when you tell stories, don't just find the safest, most obvious, unobjectionable characters to fill your stories with. Find the weirdos, the people who break expectations. Don't let us know where the story is going just because we've met this person and we know what people like that do. Find the people that we say, wow, I've got to know what that weird cow is up to. Second is cheats. So this is Sisyphus. He rolled a boulder up a hill for all of eternity. And why? Well, he was a really bad host. So he was an innkeeper, and he would kill his guests. So really bad host. And he was cursed to do this for all of eternity. And because the old stories used to always tell us what happens to people who break the rules. And evolutionary biologists say that that's how we made societies, basically. We had to convince each other that breaking the rules would get you punished. That's how we held tribes together. So stories, we're programmed to listen to and share stories that are about people who break the rules, and we want to find out what happens to them. So in our modern society, we actually don't like a lot of the rules. So we have another kind of Sisyphus. We have the rebel who's trying to break rules that we hate. So the old stories were, leave your father's cabin, you're going to get eaten by the wolf, right? Don't break the rules. Now we love stories about people who are breaking the rules that we're rooting for. So we created factory farms to be this hated machine that was taking over the world, and we asked people to be the heroes of this story by joining this rebel force. People want to see stories about those who break societal norms and see what happens to them. That creates the tension and drama, unlike the tension and drama of two women living with a guy and what's going to happen next, right? So these are the stories that matter to people and they want to share. So we can use telling a story, make sure there are characters in it, make sure those characters are weird, and make sure that they're actually pushing back against the normal way of doing things, and people will tune in and listen. So those are the transformations. Make your audience the hero. Access your inner Yoda. Use freaks and cheats. And please stop telling your audiences that they suck. Talk about how great they can be. And that's the end of my time, so thank you. All right. Does anybody have any questions? If you want to know how I did that, I can tell you. Questions, thoughts, comments? Yeah.
There you go.
Not to support Three's company, but they were cheats too. I mean, they're two girls living with a guy. Mm-hmm. We didn't know whether he was straight or gay. Back then, that was cheating, breaking the rules.
Yes.
So in its own corny-ass way, it was doing sort of the same things.
Yeah, that's actually a really great point, and I beat up on Three's company quite a bit, but you're really right. It seems so quaint and trite now the way it was treating things like sexuality, but that was exactly the point. It was like, here's people who are doing things a way that other people are frowning at or it's not supposed to be done. What kind of trouble are they going to get into? So yeah, it's a wonderful point. Thanks. Any other comments or questions? All right. Well, thanks for your time.